the main method. And that's a great place to put it. That's where the computer knows where to look for code it should run. But as your programs get a lot more complicated, you're probably going to need a few more organizational options than just the main method. Let's take this code for example. These are some instructions for how to bake cookies, and it's a lot of lines of text. It's sort of hard to look at and understand exactly what's going on unless you start really looking at each line of code. And if you think about it, rarely when someone gives you a recipe is it just a big long list of instructions. It's usually broken into segments like prep work, mixing, final steps, things like that. We can do that with these instructions by just sort of adding some white space so we have a better idea of how we would break this code up logically. Even just doing this helps us as humans look at this code and get a better sense of what it's supposed to do. But there's actually a way within the code that we can better organize this and even name each of these sections. That method is called methods. A static method is a grouped list of statements with a name that you choose and that you can use at any time. What you do is you create your method and then you put whatever statements you want inside of it, and then whenever you call it by name, those statements run. It's like making your own Java keyword. Right now, this is generally how your class is organized. You have your overall class, and then inside of that, just one layer, you've got the main method, and that's where all your statements are. But here is a reorganized class where you still have the main method, but if you look inside the main method, it's calling other methods, and then that's where those statements are. So now I have a much more useful organization for my code because I could say, name these methods something meaningful so that when I look at it, I get a better sense of what each piece of code is trying to do. Here's the syntax for how to create your own methods. It looks very similar to the main method, public static void, but then instead of main, you give it your own name. Remember, you should follow Java's naming conventions, so no spaces and camel casing. After your name, you put a set of parentheses, and then an open curly brace, and then all of the statements that you want, and then a closing curly brace. You can have as many statements as you want within the method, doesn't matter. Once you have your method declared or created, then you're going to call your method from the main. And the way that you call it is by name, just the name you gave your class, that set of parentheses, and then a semicolon to end the line. Let's take our Hello World example. This is how it works without any other methods. This is the closing curly brace for the main method. This is the closing curly brace for the class. And this is where you're going to put all of your methods. They should be outside of the main method, but inside of the class, making them and the main method essentially on the same level of organization. Now I can put statements in my method of my creation, and at this point I could run my code, but nothing would happen. That's because the computer is still looking to the main method to decide what it should do, and right now the main method has nothing in it. That's why I need my call. Now, because I've added the name of my method, those parentheses and the semicolon, the computer knows, hey, go find that method and do whatever statements are inside of it. Thus, this code now produces the Hello World output. Let's go back to our cookie example. Here's all of our lines of code with some white space to help us separate them. If we look closely, we essentially have 3 tasks, where one of the tasks is actually repeated. This is another huge benefit of methods. In this implementation, you just have to cut and paste those lines of code. But with methods, you can write a method to do this middle work and then just call it twice, thus saving you plenty of code to write. And I promise you, with how much code you're writing, you're going to want to save yourself as many lines as you can. Here's a fixed version of this class. Now in main, you have these very concise and well-named method calls, so you kind of get an overall idea of what your program's going to do. And then underneath that, all individually named and organized, you have your methods. So the way this is going to work is that the computer is going to start at the very first line of main. It's going to see that method call, and it's going to jump down to that method, do everything in there, come back, see that call to bake, jump down to bake, do all of that, come back, see the second call to bake, do all of that, and then finally finish it off. So this will produce the same lines of code as it did before, except now it's way better organized.